Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd, fa'a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Sadaqallahul azim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we're doing Surah Baqarah ayah number 76, carrying on from the last ayah, which is to connect. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذا لقوا الذين آمنوا قالوا آمنا وإذا خلا بعضهم إلى بعض قالوا أتحدثونهم بما فتح الله عليكم ليحاجوكم به عند ربكم أفلا تعقلون صدق الله العظيم. And when they meet those who believe, they say, we have believed. But when they are alone with one another, they say, do you talk to them about what Allah has revealed to you, so they can argue with you about it before your Lord? Then will you not reason? So this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is quoting the Yahud. The two groups we spoke about in the last session, the one group decided that the best way to infiltrate the Sahaba and influence them according to their wishes and get them to weaken their iman or lose it altogether, was that you went to them and agreed with them, with whatever the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam told them. You agreed with them, and that way they could gain influence. The other group said, no, we want to stay apart from them and reject and revoke anything they give to us. Anything they say, we'll just reject it, we won't accept it. So these two groups slightly disagreed with each other, although both were hell-bent, dead set about ruining the iman of the Sahaba. So the Yahud in Medina, who would pretend to be believers, felt that they could gain the trust of the Sahaba with this strategy. So they would go to them, and as I mentioned previously, they would hear what was being said about the descriptions of the Prophet ﷺ in the Torah, or particular types of aspects of Aqidah. And they would agree. They say, yeah, this is actually in the Torah, that you're right, and this is really good. So by doing that, they were trying to make inroads to the Sahaba by gaining their trust. So it was a way of gaining trust by giving that information that the Sahaba knew to be genuine. So the Sahaba had heard it from Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then these were, from this group would come to them, these Yahud would come to them, and they would offer the same information. You know, I saw this, or I understood such and such. I found out that this is in the Torah, and you know, you're saying it as well, and we agree with you. So this kind of approach was used by this particular group of Yahud. Now, when that was put across, the Sahaba will be convinced that these people are genuine because they're agreeing with us, and they're agreeing with us with important information, which kind of leaves them exposed if they were to deny it now. So they have to be genuine because the information is so good, the information is so real, it's accurate, it's correct, it agrees with what we've been told by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they can't really they can't be pretending here. So this sort of thing convinces Sahaba on the one side. On the other side is the fact that you have to understand, as we talked about before, the rocks and the similitude of rocks, but meaning the hearts, and the hearts of the Anbiya al-Islam, the hearts of the Awliya, the saints, and the hearts of the Muttaqi type people. Well, the Sahaba were sort of almost at the level of the Anbiya, because they were having this close companionship, sohbat, with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and so they understood and they felt the love for the people, wanting everybody to become Muslim and be saved from Allah's ghadab, especially when it came to the Ahlul Kitab, the Yahud and the Nasara. They lived with them for generations, and they had such similarities in their books with what was coming in the Quran. So the Sahaba were more than keen to get them to come along and become Muslim. And this love for them to be saved, which was in the hearts of the Sahaba, is the second aspect, which the Yahud in a sense, they took advantage of. They took advantage of that, which is, it's a nasty thing to do. It's not nice to take advantage of somebody's genuine love or open-heartedness towards you. But to these people, it was not something weighty, so not something they considered. As far as they were concerned, they wanted to ruin the Iman of the Sahaba any which way they could, and this was one possible way, and they went ahead regardless of the fact that it was a genuine love that was being shown to them from the Sahaba Ikram. So they went ahead and did it. And of course, as I say, the Sahaba were taken by this approach because of, on the one hand, the accuracy which was coming from these people in terms of agreeing with the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and secondly, as I said, their natural love for these people. So that's the context of the ayah. Now I want to look at what it would mean for us today. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذا لقوا الذين آمنوا قالوا آمنا وإذا خلا بعضهم إلى بعض قالوا أتحدثونهم بما فتح الله عليكم ليحاجوكم به عند ربكم أفلا تعقلون. And when they meet those who believe, they say, we have believed. But when they are alone with one another, they say, do you talk to them about what Allah has revealed to you so they can argue with you about it before your Lord? Then will you not reason? So here we have this this interchange between these two groups of Yahud, the ones who are obstinate, they absolutely want to stay away and deny openly with the Sahaba that no, what you have we don't agree with, and those who wanted to play this hypocritical game where they pretended to accept much of what the Sahaba said and tried to gain their confidence. So this ayah is talking about the two and the discussion between the two groups, which Allah Ta'ala has quoted in the Quran about them. That one group who are obstinate saying to the other group, why are you giving this information to these people? Why are you telling them these important things? Because it makes it difficult for us to defend ourselves in front of Allah Ta'ala on the Day of Judgment. If you tell these things and say, yeah, it is in our Torah, which we know it is, but we want to have some kind of excuse, and you're kind of letting it all out. So there was that difference between the two, but nevertheless, things continued as they did. So for us today, what does that mean? Well, if you look at the basic principle is that you have a group represented by the Sahaba, or people who have a belief, and then you have an external group who doesn't like that group, belief, or doesn't accept that belief, or doesn't want to follow it. So they devise two different strategies. One, either just completely reject it, or two, you have a group who, known to the first group, are going to the ones who have the belief to try to agree with them, but to try to influence them at some later time, having once gained their trust. So that's what we're talking about. So how do we transpose that? How do we fit that into lessons for us? Okay, there is a lot going on in the world today that those who are awake to what is going on are aware of. Okay, now I don't have to list these things. Most of us are aware of these things, and of course, I don't want any issues with YouTube because I would need to keep these programs going, inshallah. But we're aware there is a lot going on in the world today, from the pandemic to the events that are happening with Russia, Ukraine, with events happening in terms of fuel prices and food prices, and what's happening with the production of food and what is in the future. Allah knows best. But all of this seems to suggest that the strategies of those who are elitist, globalist, are becoming more and more obvious, and the noose is tightening around the world. So that's the lot that's going on in the world today. And those people who are awake are those people who recognize this sort of thing and know it to various different extents. They understand what's going on, the fraud that's going on, the lies, the deception, and the overall gain and objective being one of control, surveillance, subjugation, and basically putting power in the hands of the few, the so-called elite, and the rest of us are subjugated. So that's what's happening. Now, of those people who are awake, we seek to find new people who can give us insight to understand what is happening and what is coming. This is important because, of course, when you're awake to what's going on, and there's so much that's going on, and it's impacting you, and it's happening all around you, all at once, all the different things, then yes, there is this need, this hunger even, to know what's going on and to listen to different people who are able to connect the dots, so to speak, and be able to piece it together for us, because otherwise it's very difficult for individuals who are awake but who don't have resources to be able to piece all of it together. So it's good to listen to people who are sort of in that field and doing the work, putting the pieces together, connecting the dots for us, and then allowing us to draw our own conclusions from it. So that's the kind of person that is very valuable to the awake population, because they want to know what's going on and they want to be in touch with it. They want the fingers on the pulse. They want to know what's happening next, because, well, it's frightening. Let's be honest, it's frightening. It's very concerning. People are in a state of anxiety, to say the least, for what is going on. And of course, this is with the people who are awake. Those who are not awake, which is tragically the majority, they're just carrying on with the world, and all these events are unrelated, random events, which are the sorts of things that generally happen anyway. So it's okay, it'll work itself out, because this always has worked itself out. That's the way they see it. So they carry on, oblivious to the fact that the noose is actually tightening. So those who are awake are not like that. They're in a state of anxiety, need to know what's going on, and need to find out from whoever can come along with an understanding of it. However, amongst such people are those who are not truly sincere. These people that we are listening to, and I'm not going to give names, and I'm not going to point at anybody, and to be honest with you, I really don't know myself. All I know is that the concept exists, that not everybody is sincere. That we know, and that's practically child's play. It's common sense. However, who is and who isn't, I don't know, because it can be quite complicated as well, in the sense that somebody could be insincere and yet become sincere later on. Okay, or somebody could be sincere to begin with and become insincere later on. We don't know, right? We don't know, but it's just the state of affairs in the world today that we have people who are giving us what's going on, helping us to connect the dots, or just connecting the dots for us, and we trust them. And what they say makes sense. What they say seems to fit the facts, and that's fine. However, these people, they come with good information, which is agreeable, maybe even informative and truthful, yet they're not with us. They are not with us. They're giving us information just like the Sahaba were facing this group of Yahud who would accept and agree and even add to what the Sahaba had been told by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and all really done to gain their trust for the ulterior motives. So this is the same thing today, where we have people who will tell us things that we understand now because we've heard it from other people. So it's agreeable, it's informative, and truthful. So these people gain our trust. And this is what is known as controlled opposition. Controlled opposition. That's someone who the opposition believes will be useful, and this whole strategy they believe is useful, because you can't control everything, no matter how good you are, whichever side of the fence you're on as well, for that matter. You can't control everything. All the good people cannot control all the bad people. All the bad people can't actually control all the good. This is just the state of life that Allah Ta'ala has designed in this world. There will always be, and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told us this, that there will always be this conflict between good and evil. This will continue, he said, up until practically the last day. So that's where we are. And because there is a conflict, it shows that neither has actually subdued the other. Although, generally speaking, it does happen to be that the bad is generally subduing the good. And that is the globalist, elitist, etc. type of groups who have and are in positions of power and control of power, so that the rest of us are easily forced to comply. So this controlled opposition is that which is sent out by the negative side, because they're aware that the positive side is able to put up a resistance, able to find certain things out, able to realize things, able to discover things, able to expose things, which they would rather didn't happen. But of course, as I say, neither side has complete control over the other, and each side has some victories against the other. So this is a strategy that's come up from the negative side to say, okay, we will give the particular people permission and guidance to allow certain information out which is agreeable to the other side. And once that happens, then our people who are doing that, our controlled opposition, will gain favor, will gain trust. And once they do, then we can instruct them which path to take, which way to influence the other group. And that is what is happening with controlled opposition. For us, it creates a situation. We're awake, we know what's going on, we want to hear from people, we'd like to hear from new people. We may suspect somebody is a controlled opposition, but the information they're giving is good, it's agreeable. What do? So, relating back to the idea of the three types of heart, Islam is merciful, tolerant, and forgiving. It imbues, therefore, such characteristics in its followers. If the religion itself has these core elements of mercy, tolerance, forgiveness, then whoever learns it, whoever adheres to it, to Islam, will develop such characteristics in themselves. And so that's what's happening with a lot of the Muslims. And when I'm talking about people who are awake, by the way, we know thousands of people are awake to what's going on, and not all of them are Muslim. In fact, the majority are not Muslim. I'm not talking about that. Because of the context of this ayah, I want to remain within the bounds of the Muslims, the believers, who are awake at the same time. And while they're there, let me just say that just because a Muslim is not awake to what is going on in the world does not mean that that Muslim is no longer a believer, or that Muslim is not going to Jannah, or is not in the care or the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That can still happen. A person can be fooled, can be not awake, can be taken by the system, yet may still go to Jannah. For there are many reasons Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given by which a person can achieve Allah ta'ala's pleasure. So I don't want to look at things in that manner. All I'm looking at is just specifically the believers who are awake to what's going on in the world and their recognition of controlled opposition and what to do. So one of the reasons that such controlled opposition make inroads to those who are awake, and I'm specifically referring to believers with what's known as firasa. Firasa is insight, and that's what makes them awake to what's going on, having that insight. Well, the reason why these people, controlled opposition, can make inroads is because such believers want all people to know the truth and be saved. Again, going back to the idea of the Sahaba who had this tarbiyah from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and therefore upon the similar sort of outlook of love and mercy towards everybody. So people who are awake, and this actually is generally across the board, even with non-Muslims, they are keen to wake everybody else up who's not awake. And there is a genuine amount of love and, concern, care that these people have for the rest of humanity. So you see them do various active things to make awareness amongst those who are still not yet awake to what's going on. So this love comes into it again, and coming from this state of the three types of rock which means the three types of heart. So the highest form, as I said, is that of the Anbiya alayhi salam. We can't achieve that, but we can aspire to it. And aspiring to it means having this open-hearted, open-minded approach to everybody, that even the controlled opposition people who would actually be quite sinister, because knowing everything and still doing what they're doing is quite a sinister thing to do. So even for those people, those who are awake, when they hear good things from these people, and they will want for the controlled opposition to actually switch sides and become genuine, become sincere out of the love for them. Because at the end of the day, controlled opposition is still human beings who are sort of, well, they're awake, but they're just on the wrong side of the fence, and deliberately so. Now we can go deeper and look at the condition of the hearts of these people, but we leave that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What I want to do at this point is simply look at the surface issue, which is that those who are awake want those who are not awake to become awake, to become aware of what's going on. And that also means it also envelopes controlled opposition. We want genuinely, sincerely, for the controlled opposition to actually become genuinely sincere and realize that they are only adding to the problem, and come over to the side of the awake. So we accept them, or we accept much of what they say, because we know disagrees with what we already know of the truth of what's going on, even though the controlled opposition is obviously doing the same thing as the Yahud were doing, which is giving a controlled amount of information out to us, simply to win us over, simply to get our loyalty. However, as I said, because of the love knows no bounds. Because of that love, we say, okay, they're still human beings. They still need to be convinced, and we need them on our side, especially because of the ability and skills they have in what they're doing. We could do with genuine people who have the same knowledge and access to resources that the controlled opposition has. So I think that this is something that, perhaps is not looked at, and it's not acknowledged as such. All too quickly find it. As soon as someone is found out to be a controlled opposition type person, people switch off. People don't want to listen to that person anymore. But this ayah is giving us, especially in the context of the heart, that a believer isn't like that. A believer will not discard someone because of something they found out like this. Yes, it's not easy to have that relationship with a controlled opposition person, but having said that, what's to say what could happen were a controlled opposition person actually confronted respectfully, lovingly, that we want you to come over to our side. We want you to be sincere. You know what's going on better than those who are not awake. But you're just on the wrong side of the fence. Why don't you come over and be with us and help us with your skill set and your resources? So, wallahu alam, they could change, and they could be a very good use to those who are awake as a resource, inshallah. So this is based upon the context of the ayah being love. So, having said that, I want to look at another issue, which is going to be prevalent. It is prevalent in the world environment as a result of controlled opposition. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا تقوم الساعة حتى يمر الرجل بقبر الرجل فيقول يا ليتني مكانه صدق الرسول. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the hour will not be established until a man passes by the grave of another man and he says, would that I were in his place. The hour, meaning Qiyamah, will not be established until a man passes by the grave of another man and he says, would that I were in his place. So, this hadith is one of the signs of the coming of Qiyamah, and it's describing the state of people, that they will pass by graves, and as a result of what's going on, the confusion. This hadith is saying that towards the end days there will be much confusion amongst people in all kinds of matters. And that's what we're finding today. There is a lot of confusion, and a lot of that confusion is put forward because of controlled opposition as well. So we don't know what to believe. We don't know who to believe sometimes. And what's right, what's wrong, what seems to be right today ends up being disproven tomorrow. What seems to be genuine today seems to be disproven to be hypocritical, double standard, or controlled opposition tomorrow. So the hadith is highlighting some of these events which are happening, which we are seeing for ourselves, and which are adding to the general overall state of confusion amongst the people. And to such an extent that people are wanting to die or be in the grave. I wish I wasn't here anymore. So one such matter that we could look into will be who to trust as being awake sincerely to the evils occurring in the world, to such an extent that many will wish to no longer be in this life. And that's what's happening, as I say. Who to trust. Who is really awake, but sincerely awake, not just awake and trying to control opposition, but rather is awake genuinely and wants to help other people. Who is such a person and who is not? And as a result of this happening with controlled opposition type people as well, then it's coming to such an extent that many people will wish to no longer be in this life. People will become like that, or many people already are. Don't know what to believe, don't know who's right, don't know who's wrong. I thought he was right. I was following him for days, for weeks, for months, for years, and then suddenly I found out he was this, he was that. This sort of thing is happening. People are finding that somebody they trusted for a long time, and now they find out something about him or her, and now they don't know what to do with all the information that they've been told. They now have to go back and reassess all that information, which they at one time accepted as being true. Now they don't know. So this sort of thing is happening. And that is also part of the impact of controlled opposition, by the way. That is a part of what they do. If they don't convince you, then at least they leave you confused, who to trust, who not to trust. Because every one controlled opposition person is going to have the general population feel doubts about those who perhaps are genuine and awake. They will feel doubts about them as well, because we don't know who is and who isn't. So it becomes a problem. And that's what one of the aspects of this hadith, that there is such confusion, because you don't know who is telling the truth, and you don't know who's telling the lies, and you don't know who is controlled opposition. And as a result of that, you just feel overwhelmed with what's going on, with trying to find the truth, with having to handle and deal with being lied to, having been deceived for months or years. All of this comes together, and this hadith is talking about the state of such people that wish that they died. That just, I don't want to live anymore. I've had enough. I can't deal with this anymore. That's what they'll become like. That's what the hadith is telling us in respect to the context of this ayah. Okay, so where do we go from there? A believer's heart should always be connected to Allah ta-aalaa. So in this state of confusion that we're finding ourselves in this day and age, where so much is going on, so much we know, so much we don't know, so much we suspect may be going on, so much we assume may be going on as well. And amongst all of that, there's the lies and the deceit, the promises that are made, this is going to happen on this day and that's going to happen on such and such a day, and those things don't transpire on those days. What that leaves a person to do is, as I say, either you become confused and overwhelmed and you wish for death, or the way through it is for the believer to connect his or her heart to Allah Ta'ala. Because once your heart is connected to Allah Ta'ala, then whether you receive information that is right or wrong, controlled or deceptive or otherwise, it won't matter too much to you. Why? Because your focus is no longer upon events and upon predictions and upon people. Your focus is now on the Creator, Rabbal Alameen. And when your focus is on Rabbal Alameen, your trust, tawakkul, is upon Him, knowing that He is the one who is ultimately in control of everything, then this sort of realization and feeling in the heart will lighten the burden, will remove the stress and strain of the different things that are happening in the world, which can be impacted by controlled opposition, by lies, by deceit, and so on and so on. You sort of come away from all of that, and your focus being on Allah Ta'ala, your submission being to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, you accepting that one, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, that there is no power, no might, no ability except with Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. So whoever's doing whatever they're doing, they're not doing it because of themselves, they're doing it because Allah's allowing it and He is in control. And number two, that Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We belong to Allah Ta'ala and we will be returning to Him. So whatever happens, things have been happening throughout human history for so long as human beings have been on earth. Some things perhaps even far more greater than what we have today. And so the believer takes comfort in being with Allah Ta'ala, in being focused on Allah Ta'ala, and living their life out and returning to that basic element. Why am I created? Why am I here? And the response being that liya'budullah, to worship Allah. So they return to that state. Now this is going to connect to the state of the awliya. That's the awliya state, the saint, who he or she recognizes and maintains the recognition of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala and our duty, our purpose in life. It is not to get involved with whatever's going on in the world. Because at the end of the day, whatever's happening is happening at levels that we are not engaged in or at that level ourselves. We are not prime ministers and presidents, group leaders, etc., millionaires, whatever, that we are going to engage with these people and have an influence. Majority of us are simply home people. We're looking after our families. We're concerned what's going to happen. We're concerned a bit about the future. We're concerned about the prices of fuel and food and so on. But if we could just focus on Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, then even these concerns which come to us as a result of what's going on globally with the elites, with the globalists, then we would find some sukoon. We would find some sukoon. We would return to the basic element of worshipping Allah Ta'ala and bypass everything and everyone, and focusing on Allah Ta'ala will allow us to have that comfort. And so whatever else happens, we know that we have lived and died for the right reason, rather than got involved with, and this happens actually a lot with people, they become involved a lot with what's going on, so involved in looking at the signs and of the end times and looking at what's coming, what's happening, or how to interpret this, how to relate the hadith, how to relate the predictions to what's going on, etc., that it becomes overwhelming. You become too absorbed in that, and you forget that all of those things are really just an indicator of the urgency with which we need to renew our efforts for what we're actually being put on this earth for, which again is back to basics. Purpose of creation, worship Allah. Things will happen. Things will happen in the world. There will be groups, there will be evil people, there will be globalists, there will be elitists. This is nothing new. Pharaoh was a globalist, an elitist. Nimrod was, and so on. But they're come and gone. Whereas if you look at the state of the people in those times, the good people, the righteous people, they simply struggle to continue their ibadah, their connection with Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. So that's what I'm saying here today. I think that there needs to be a sort of calming down of people who are awake, alhamdulillah. But as I said earlier, even if you're not awake, you can still make it to Jannah. And maybe those people who are not awake, but focusing on their ibadah and not in a state of anxiety because of being awake, perhaps they're doing better. Perhaps they're doing better because they're going to get to Jannah, subhanAllah, without all the stress and anxiety. So maybe those who are awake could take a lesson from those who are not and be able to avoid the fitna, the fasad of controlled opposition, anxiety, passing by a grave and wishing you were in it because of how overwhelming it all is. Perhaps we need to just sort of step back a little bit now. And subhanAllah, and I feel like that sometimes. I get dozens of messages, hundreds in a day of what's going on in this article, that article, this video, that video. And a lot of the times, all you want to do is just flick through them, scroll to the bottom, and get on with what you've got to do. Because it doesn't change anything. Whether you go through those videos and watch each and every single one, and after half an hour or an hour be in a state of anxiety, or whether you ignore them, you still got to do the ibadah. You've still got your salah to pray. You've still got your fasting to fast. You've still got your duties and responsibilities to fellow mankind, your immediate relatives, your parents and wife and husband, to look after your children, to look after and fend for them, as you had before you saw those videos. Those videos didn't make any difference. And in majority of the cases, they don't as well. They are in realms or levels beyond us. But our anxiety then affects us. Whereas if we are just to return to the basics, perhaps that would get us through, inshallah. And we wouldn't be in the situation of the man who passes by the grave and wishes he's in it. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us tawfiq to understand and benefit from this, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.